Hi, Sunny. The mayor's joining us now. Here he is.
How are we doing tonight, everyone?
Doing well.
Yeah. Are we coming on a quorum? I guess I suppose we should still have a quorum, even though it's a work study.
We have a quorum now, Mayor.
Do we? All right. Is there anyone who's absent?
Lisa has not joined us yet.
Okay, so Lisa, all right.
Yes.
Well, fortunately, we do not have a requirement for the pledge until the second meeting. So we can go ahead and just get started. The This meeting was put together to continue the conversations that we started, or I guess not so much the conversation, but the consideration of council manager form of government and how that is working in Litchfield. And the information that Tom Belshie brought to us, I thought was a very good foundation for the concepts behind the council manager form of government. But after that meeting, there still were some questions by some council members in terms of whether or not the council form of government was working correctly in Litchfield, and whether or not we all understood what the roles of the council members were, and the roles of the mayor and the roles of the city manager. So in an effort to try to bring maybe some more light to that, and some transparency, quite frankly, because there have been undercurrents over a period, the last several years even, with some former council members having an appreciation for how the council manager form of government operates in the context of the council having a leader in the form of a mayor. And some of that is answered actually by state law and by city ordinance. And I sent you information through the council packet to help shed some light on that. And I just want to go through some of those rules that are provided by state statute and by our city code, so you can understand, and hopefully we'll have a foundation or a basis in which to take a look at how we operate in Litchfield Park. So the state law basically in Title IX sets out all the different rules of cities and towns. And if you go to things like Article 9-231, that defines the authority of the council. And essentially what it does in that section is define that all corporate powers of the city are held by the council, which means the council is the group or the entity that is able to bind the city to contracts. The council is the group that is able to set city policy. It is the group that passes ordinances so that it is able to have legislative acts that impact its residents. It controls the use of property through the general plan and through the various ordinances and the zoning codes that we have. So all of that is defined in state law. State law goes on to define the duties of the mayor, in the state statutes under in 9-236, the mayor is defined as the chief executive officer of the city. And he is provided all of the powers and duties that are associated with being a chief executive officer, and any additional powers and duties that are outlined by city ordinance. Finally, Article 9 also provides the council in 9-303, provides the council with the authority to adopt an officer called a city manager. And if we do adopt an officer called a city manager, then that statutory provision provides us the authority by ordinance to define what the city manager does. So if you look now to how Litchfield has dealt with that, Litchfield in our municipal code in Article 2-1, we define our city council and talk about terms of office, when they are elected, how they're elected, and what they do. And what it essentially restates is state law, which is that all corporate authority is vested in the city council. So the city council is where you take actions and specifically what it says is that the council has to act through ordinances, motions, declarations, and consents. So there are specific ways in which the council is given the authority to act by our municipal code. The municipal code in Article 2-2 talks about the mayor and defines the duties of the mayor. And Article 2-2 includes things such as that the mayor is the chairman of the council. So the mayor is given the authority to operate and run the council meetings. The mayor is designated as the head of city government for all official and ceremonial acts. The mayor is specifically directed to act on behalf of the council and confer with and advise the city manager on whether the policies and goals that council has adopted are being met by city management and city manager and city staff. He's also specifically by ordinance given the responsibility to do all of the duties that are associated with being the chief executive officer. So the mayor's duties are defined in our code, and this code goes back to, I'm going to guess, maybe 1990 or so. It goes quite a ways back in the history of the city when this was adopted. There's also a section in our code that defines what the city manager does, and that definition has a list of the types of things that he is responsible for doing. So by municipal code, we have defined that job. And then we further define it with a job description that applies to the city manager and other documents such as references in his employment contract and those sorts of things. But in each case, those enabling documents all define the city manager as being the administrative head of the city. Essentially, in a corporate world, it would be similar to a chief operating officer. So the actual implementation of policies and directions from council, that is vested in and given, the responsibility is given to the city manager. The other thing that is clear, if you look through these different regulatory and statutory schemes, is that everyone on the council, whether it's the mayor or it's an individual council member, is only supposed to interact with staff through the city manager. So if you have questions about city operations, you go to the city manager, whether you're the mayor or you're a council member. If you have ideas for what the city could be doing or might consider doing, again, you go to the city manager. Everything from the city council is directed through the city manager, unless the council makes a specific direction to either the mayor or to individual council member to go in a different route. So it would be possible for the council to sit down and decide that we wanted to have some either individual council member or a group of council members work with a particular department head. So for example, the rec, it might, it would be possible for the council to direct an individual council member to work directly with the head of the recreation department on a particular project or question. So something like that is possible, but it is only at a specific direction of the council itself. So the first thing is are there any questions about the different roles as they're defined either by state statute or by our municipal code? Okay, we got a Councilman Rostosi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the way you described it was a little bit different than the training that I understood from the training. So I guess I'd just be looking for clarity. My understanding from the training was that the council, including the mayor, was the equivalent of a board of directors, and that the city manager was the equivalent of the chief executive. The way you described it was the mayor is the chief executive and the city manager reports to the mayor as a chief operating officer. So
the city manager doesn't report individually to the mayor. The statutory scheme was described by Tom Belshie and is accurately described that the council is similar to a board of directors. I don't remember if Tom referred to the city manager as being the chief executive officer. If he did, it was incorrect based upon both state law and municipal code. And quite frankly, it's probably never operated any differently than what our state statute and our municipal code says. And that is that the mayor is the chief executive officer, and the mayor is charged with the responsibility of conferring with the city manager to make sure that council directives and goals and council policies are in fact being implemented by the city manager. And that is specifically in our code. So Tom, for whatever reason, I don't know that Tom looked over our code before he came here. I'm going to actually talk to Tom a little bit about that because I think that he may have given the wrong impression, and I suspect our code is very similar to all of the codes for the cities across the valley because it starts from state statute, and the state statute is very clear that the mayor is the chief executive officer of the city. That's in the statutory language in Article 9.
So I think the other question I would have is the way that read to me was that the mayor is responsible for working with the city manager to enact the will of the council, which to me is different
Correct.
than a
That's
chief
correct.
Right. But if we think in terms of a corporate comparison, a chief executive officer supervises a chief operating officer and doesn't necessarily need board permission to give direction to the chief operating officer. So what I'm interpreting is,
I don't know that the scheme that is set forth in these statutes and ordinances would say that in fulfilling the duty to confer with the city manager, and the actual language is let's see. Is confer with and advise the city manager to ensure that the council policies and programs are implemented. That I don't think that says that the mayor has to go to the council and ask for direction on how to do that. I think that's part of the duties of the mayor to figure that out. But there needs to be a council policy, and there needs to be direction to support what you're trying to see if the city manager is implementing. So you wouldn't try to implement something that was not something that had been approved by the council.
so I guess that's sort of was the clarification I was looking for. The way I read that and the way I understood the training at the last meeting was that ultimately for the vast majority of things, the authority rests with the council. And that to the extent that the mayor is interacting with the city manager and giving direction, then the mayor is giving direction based on the direction that the council has given, not necessarily independently giving his own direction.
I think that's correct. Yeah, and I think that's the way it in fact works, just in practice. The interaction that goes on, that has gone on since I've been mayor, so it goes back, I don't know, 14 years plus, is to supervise in the sense of making sure that the policies that have been adopted are being implemented. You know, we have general policies. In some cases, they're not policies that have been voted on, in many years, but we expect that our public works budget, for example, is going to be spent efficiently and will result in a well-maintained city. So if we have areas of our grass that really start looking bad, or if we have weeds growing up in the medians that look really bad, those are things I think come within the duty of the mayor to say something to the manager in terms of how are you using these funds, because it doesn't appear that you're fulfilling our council's desire to have this city very well maintained. But within that understanding, that is the way it has worked. And I think that fits within the scope of what's defined in state law and the ordinances. That it would be the other thing that was general. Go ahead, Councilman Donahue.
Well, so I have a little bit of a question. So say, for instance, because Tom, you appear to be very much in touch with a lot of people, way more than we are, obviously, just with all your involvement with different things. So if you're talking to Matthew about something that we as a council may not know yet know about, then we will find out about that in Matthew's report, I guess, is how that goes.
You will, assuming that it's something that is ready for public knowledge. And I'll give you a specific example of that. Matthew and I had a meeting with a local individual who was part of a local group who was interested and probably beyond interested, very interested in developing a parcel within the city center. And that group has some general ideas about what they want to do. And so we had a meeting with Matthew and I and that individual to talk about the group's general interest, what their plans, what they'd like to do, and they wanted to understand how does that fit into the city center and what the city center, how it's been moving forward, and how does the process go if that individual wants to take it to the next step. So we had a meeting that went through all of that, and the fact that we had the meeting is something that would be shared with the council in one way or another. Which a good example is the sharing that I'm doing with you right now about that. But the information that goes to who the group is and what they specifically want to do is not public knowledge, and is something that the group controls and rightfully controls, because if they go forward, they're going to want to come out with press releases and marketing information and be able to control the manner in which they make those kinds of announcements to the community at large and to the businesses across the Southwest Valley. Will be part of it's part of what they control and they need to control. So some information that will come to Matthew, and some information that will come to me, and that may come to both of us. Some of it may not be public information that we can share with all the council, because it's not something we have been authorized by the person giving us the information to share. So that information will come out, but it'll come out more slowly. In the particular case of this development, probably the way that it will come out first is to go to the city manager, city center working group to talk about the specific plan and where they want to put it and what parcel it is, and to start talking about things like minimum bids and the various things we need to bring back to council for a suggestion on an RFP for the property, assuming that we think they want to move forward. So it'll come in pieces.
So if people approach us on things, our first stop is city manager. Correct. Right.
Yeah, the city manager is the clearinghouse for all the information, and that, it should be. I try generally to follow a situation where I don't do anything the city manager is not aware of. And in most cases, the city manager would be involved in meetings which have anything to do with any aspect of the city. And then anybody in the staff that needs to be involved in it will, he is a clearinghouse to take that information down to staff and to get information that may be needed to go back, to go back to whoever has prompted the meetings or the discussions. Councilor Stossy.
I had a follow-up question to Ann's question. So let's just, for the sake of discussion, let's pretend that that party that's interested in doing a development in the city center came to you, but what they wanted to do did not fit exactly within the lines of what we've already designed city center for. And so they were asking questions about what's acceptable as far as changes and what's not acceptable as far as changes. So I guess I would be curious, do you answer those questions? Does Matthew answer those questions, or how do those questions get answered?
The discussion about what is, what is a use that is permissible, or what is an elevation or a facade that might be permissible in the city center. I do get questions about that I regularly get questions about that. My response is always, the very first thing I tell people is to go to the materials that are published on our website, which go through the city center plan that was adopted by the council, that shows the kinds of the concepts that we generally favor. And then I refer them to the materials on the park and the reports that we have that go through in detail what the park's going to look like and what its functions are. And then I refer them specifically to the Church at Old Litchfield Park, the Wigwam, and the school as being architectural designs and facades that any design, the council has said, any design needs to fit into those that same class of architecture, not be identical, but be consistent with it so that it doesn't stick out and look strange. And then I tell them that the very first step in any proposal process, the very first step before they would even be authorized to purchase property if they had the best bid, is to bring a design to council, and council has to sign off on it. So it all, that's generally try to give a full answer to how you go about doing this. How do they find out if what they want to do is something that's going to be acceptable? Councilman Donahue.
Okay, now a question to extend Tom's question. So someone comes to you and do something like that, and you say, no, it's not going to fit any of this. Will we as a council find that out? Possibly we'd never hear about it.
It depends, I guess, on, on whether they ever bring it forward enough to where it would be presented to as an idea from council. So trying to think of an example of that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, Tom, obviously, I usually pre-COVID, I'm out there and see a lot of people, and you can have somebody come up and say, hey, by the way, I brought idea forward, but they said no to me, and I'm looking at them like, what are you talking about? I can see that kind of thing happening. I'm not saying that it has or it would, but I'm just curious. So do we ever find out?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think there's any idea that's been brought forward where we have just said no. And there is, I would think, in every case where at least I've had a conversation with somebody about a use in the city center, the bottom line is it has to fit within all of the discussions we've had. I can't even imagine how many pages of information there are available from the public records on the discussions of what the city center needs to be in terms of their community and what the council expects from it. So that anything that somebody wants to bring forward, my reference back to them is always go back and take a look at what's already there, because it's all been defined. And if you think it fits within the concepts, we have all the storyboards that were put together with what the architecture should look like, what the landscaping should look like, and all the discussions that make it clear that we don't really want chain restaurants like Taco Bell or McDonald's. All those things are part of the public record. And so from my standpoint, I don't try to get involved with, is your specific use okay, other than take a look at what we've already said and understand that any use and all architecture is going to be reviewed by council at least twice. So the first time is as part of the RFP process, they have to bring a proposal to council. And then the very last step in the process is you're going to come back to council after you've got design review approval. You're going to come back to council and council's got to sign off on it again. So it's a council decision, and that's made very clear to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions or comments? 'Cause I think it would be good to make sure that everybody has, feels like they understand how each of our roles are, and particularly within the council. There was some thought that some council members may take too many ideas or make too many comments to staff meaning the city manager, not that they're going to an inappropriate place, but that wasn't the council's job, that those things should come to council somehow and only go to the city manager through the filter of council. And I don't think that's what our system is set up to be. I think that a council member, in terms of doing their job of representing our community, they should go to the city manager when they have information, either when they see something that they don't think is consistent with our vision, or if they see something that one of our residents has brought up and said, our resident has said, we're not happy with this. This is not the way that Litchfield Park should be. That should be a conversation with the city manager. The city manager, as I said, he was kind of the gatekeeper, or the place that the central clearinghouse for this kind of information. He may decide that the complaint that you bring is not something that should be pursued. He has the ability to work with staff and try to make a decision. It's a code enforcement issue. Is this something that's realistic for our code enforcement officer to deal with? Or if it's a maintenance issue on a particular park or a piece of playground equipment or a median, is this something we can realistically fix, or do we have to, is this something else? That's what the city manager is supposed to do. And the only way he has that information is if our council members take their concepts. I mean, all of you, all 7 of us are representatives of our community. So I would urge you to, as you get information that you think should be shared with the city, that you do that. And to the extent that it's something that all of us need to know about it, the best way to get it to us is through the city manager, because then it can go into his Friday report and say, these are things that I've heard about, and I'm going to work on some of these and some I may not. It's an easy way to communicate the information so that all the council will know about it. Another question that came up was, how do we go about doing our planning? And I lost all of you. Let me see if I can get you all back. Yep, okay. How do we do our planning? Do we do any planning? Do we set goals and have something that we can measure and look at and see if we're making any progress? And I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want to get the input from council to make sure that what I think is true, the council understands, and it's true in your minds, and that if you think we need to do this differently or do it better, then we can certainly look at different ideas. A business, when it does a strategic plan, has got a very specific set of things or objectives that it has to satisfy or that it has to achieve. Basically, it has to find ways to create value for its customers and its other stakeholders, and it has to figure out a way that it can maximize its profits. So a strategic plan for a business will have a variety of things in it that might include expansion, it might include cost containment. There's a variety of things that can be in a plan, and then they can look at and evaluate as you go through various milestones whether you're making progress to achieving the goals that are in that plan. The city has something similar, but it's different for a city, because while we have to be financially sustainable, each city has a unique situation in terms of what its strategies are to reach what its goals are. As a council and as a city, many years ago, we put together a vision statement that gives us a kind of a guidepost for what we're trying to accomplish as we do the various things that we do as a council. both as we're establishing goals from the council standpoint and also as we make decisions. And that's set forth in our vision statement, and is something that that I look at it every year in terms of, and I look at it because of the State of the City address that I do. But I try to see if the things that we have accomplished in the last year and the things that we have stated we're going to try to accomplish in the coming years, if all of those goals fit this vision. And the vision is that together through responsible government and citizen involvement, we will enhance the city of Litchfield Park while preserving the city's unique beauty, heritage, and community values fostered by our founder, Paul Litchfield. That vision it took a while to come up with the exact words that are in there to try to describe the overall guiding goal or the overall strategic end game that we're trying to achieve. I think we all recognize that we have a unique place to live. It's a unique community. And as we make decisions, we need to make those decisions in a way that fosters the continuation of the uniqueness of our community and our neighborhoods. And we have to do that in a way that leaves our city financially sustainable. How do we express those goals? We express it first in a general plan. A general plan would be similar to an overall 10-year plan for a corporation that set very broad strategies on how we're going to use the land that's in our city. Because the use of our land is probably the place that has the biggest impact on whether or not we can reach our vision. How we use our land impacts whether our neighborhoods stay viable, whether we continue to have the same types of atmosphere and the same community relationships that are existing in our neighborhoods. All of that is impacted tremendously by the use of our land. We have consistently in our general plan laid out very restricted areas for where we were going to do certain types of development. And again, those were the product of decisions that were made by the council and eventually by the citizens who vote on the general plan to say, this is how we're going to use our land. We believe these land uses are important to achieve the goals of preserving our neighborhoods and also making the city financially sustainable. One of the things that's in the general plan that I have fought for, the vice mayor has fought for, different members of the council over the years have fought very hard for, is to make sure that we don't convert commercial land that is designated by the city in its general plan as commercial. We don't convert that to residential, not because we hate residential, but because the land use plan that was set forth in our general plan was designed to foster the vision that the council adopted for the city, which is a vision that enhances its neighborhoods. It promotes the ability of the city to keep itself a beautiful city, which means we have to generate an amount of income, and it continues its financial sustainability so that we can provide the services that our residents anticipate that they'll have in a community of our character. So the general plan is an important piece of the planning that's been done by the council, and then the implementation of the zoning code that we do on a regular basis as we're asked to look at the zoning code and modifications to that code. Those are very important pieces of whether or not we are able to achieve the goal that's set forth in our vision. We also look and plan every year. We set forth very specifically, we set forth goals for our community and goals for our staff in terms of setting priorities on what is important to the council and by implication, at least, what we believe is important to our residents. And we do that in our budget. And we do it in two very important but very different ways. First way is we take the residents' money and we spend it And if you look at our budget, it is very, very clear based on what we spend each year, where the priorities have been set. Our very highest amount of spending of any category in the city is on public works. What is that? That's, can we keep our community beautiful? Can we maintain our parks? Can we maintain our medians? Can we make the city look nice, which has always been an oasis? Can we maintain our trees? All of those things are literally almost more than 2 to 1. We devote a very large percentage of our budget public. After that, we devote the next highest level of anything is in police and then fire. So those 2 items of public safety are the number 2 and number 3, or number 2 together, category of how we spend the residents' money and how we're allocating what we believe is the residents' goal for how this city should be for them as residents. The 4th highest priority, it's kind of interesting actually, is the rec center. And it's not just the rec center, although that's a very large piece of it, but it's the rec center and all of the community programs that go with the rec center. It's the concerts in the park. It's the festivals that we do. It's the trout derby, it's the parade, along with our rec center in terms of its swimming pool and its preschool and its fitness center, its tennis courts, its basketball court. All of those are the 4th highest priority within our community. And I can tell you from my personal dedication over the last 14 years, it has taken a tremendous amount of time and effort by the council and by some specific members of the council to continue the viability of our rec programs, because they are important to Litchfield Park. They're important to the way it is, the way it presents itself. It's important to accomplishing our vision. And it literally is the 4th highest area within our budget prioritization of how we spend the people's money. So I think you can get a very, very good indication of what our goals are by taking a look at how the council has decided to spend its money. And then the second way we decide on that is our capital improvement plan. And that plan gives us, if you just by looking at the plan, you can see the different goals that the council has for the future in terms of how we want to improve the physical aspect of the city. That capital improvement plan, you really need to go beyond just the list of the prioritizations, but look at what is actually being funded and look at the strategies that are adopted to try to spend the people's money. And if you look at it, it becomes very clear that the city council has put a very strong priority on reaching the goal of getting the city center infrastructure moving. We have planned to spend a very significant amount of our available funds on the city center. But we've also not just only had one goal, we've also had the goal of maintaining our streets and improving our streets. You can see that in the capital budget. We've got flood control projects that impact the peninsula and flood control projects that impact the downtown area. We've got major street repairs on intersections like Dysart and Indian School. There's a whole variety of capital items that are in that budget and that are part of a 5-year plan in the budget that sets some pretty specific goals of what the council is intending to accomplish if we have the funds to do that. So I think there are goals established and goals that we can be held accountable to in the various budget things that we do annually. And all of those things should be brought together once a year, at least once a year, and compared against our vision. Are we spending the people's money both through the budget and through in terms of budget operating expenses and through the capital program? Are we doing that in a way that reaches the vision that we've adopted as a city? So I'd like to have your comments on that issue of planning and goals, and see if you agree with what I have said, or if you disagree and you think we need to do it differently, or do we need to take some of these things and designate them as goals? We can certainly do that. Councilman Rostosi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a different perspective, and I'm sure my different perspective is partly based on the fact that I've only been on the council for 2 years and not for 14, so I'm not steeped in the background and the history as you and the vice mayor are. But I would like to just share with you some thoughts, share with the council some thoughts on what I've seen in my 2 years on the council. When I first joined the council, one of the things that struck me in my first few meetings was I was struck with the quality of the people on the council. I'm pretty quiet in most council meetings, and the reason I'm pretty quiet is because I have questions to ask staff about various issues, but you all ask all the questions I have. So I just keep my mouth shut because you guys do such a great job of asking questions. I really sincerely believe that we have a very active, a very engaged, a very interested, and a very thoughtful every single member of the council. And so I believe that's sincere. I think we have incredible talent. It's one of the best groups of talent I've worked with in a board or a council format. But my own personal perspective is I think we're like a team that's got all the talent in the world, but we're playing 500 ball. It's like we've got Alabama's talent, but we know we're 5-5 instead of 10-0. And my concern is, and as I think about why I think that is, I just don't think we're effective as a council. And I'm going to put that on all of our shoulders, including my own. And I think the reason we're not effective is because we don't know where we're going. And so I guess I differ with you, Mayor. We don't, since I've been on the council, we have not specifically sat down and said, you know, this is where we want to go. This is where we want to be at the end of 2020. This is where we want to be at the end of 2021 in any specific way. We have never specifically sat down with the city manager and said, Mr. City Manager, this is what we want you to accomplish this year, and this is what we want you to accomplish in the next 3 years. We have never sat down with the city manager and said, Mr. City Manager, this is how you did compared to your goals this past year. We've never done a review of the city manager in my 2 years on the council. And I think that lack of a long-term plan and that lack of kind of focus on where we're going, to me, is what causes us to be ineffective. So let me give you some examples of where I think we're ineffective. I think that there are some really significant issues in front of the city that we should be talking about that we don't talk about. And examples would be, since last February, we haven't talked about City Center as a council. It hasn't been on our agenda. I think most of us would agree that's like our number one issue. It just blows my mind that we haven't talked about it for almost a year. Number two example, the city manager announced to us he was resigning in November. Not counting today, we've had 5 meetings since he announced his resignation, and we have not had a meeting to discuss what we want to do about his resignation. We did talk about making Matthew the interim, but we didn't have any discussion about whether we want to do a search, what we're looking for in our new city manager. We've had no conversations about city manager. Item number 3, the Wigwam reached out to most of us to express some concerns. We have not talked about that. And if us or staff have gotten back and are having conversations with the Wigwam, I'm not aware of it. And that, to me, what's going on with the Wigwam is a big deal in our city. Somebody should be following up on that. Meanwhile, those, what I would consider elephant issues that we're not talking about, in the same 5 meetings since we learned that our city manager was retiring and we didn't talk about what we were doing next, we did talk about 4 times out of those 5, we talked about solving a crime problem that we don't have. And we spent a lot of time figuring out precisely which intersections should get cameras, which poles the cameras should be put on. That's not strategic governing board, board of directors, city council issue as far as I'm concerned. I did ask in the initial conversation, I asked Matthew, how are our crime rates in 2020? And he told us that crime actually went down a little bit in 2019 and it's way down in 2020 because of COVID. So we don't have a crime issue, but we spent 4 out of 5 meetings talking about solving a crime issue. And meanwhile, we have a city center project that we haven't heard about in a year. We have a city manager opening that we haven't talked about, and we have a Wigwam that has issues that we haven't talked about. I think, to me, If we knew where we were going as a city council, if we had decided what was important to us, then that's what we would be talking about in our meetings. And if we don't know what's important to us, then we just talk about whatever happens to come up, whatever the most current thing is, and we kind of bounce around from urgent thing to urgent thing without any clear direction. So to me, I think we should be spending time figuring out where we want to go. I think it's critically important if and how we hire a new city manager. I think it's critically important that we know where we're going, because it's going to have a huge impact on what kind of person we want to hire to be the city manager. If we want to continue functioning like we've been functioning, no offense, but my perception, our prior city manager was just a yes man. I never heard Bill come up with an original idea. I never heard him make a comment or express an opinion until he knew what his opinion was supposed to be. If we want to keep functioning like that and we want to hire a yes man for a city manager, that's one thing. If we want to go places and do cool things, if we want, like our training said, if we want a CEO for a city manager, someone who's going to be a partner with the city council in taking this city, from 5-5 to 10-0, that's a different person we're looking for. And I don't know, I know my opinion, but I don't know the opinion of the council. And if the opinion of the council is everybody's fine with how we're doing things now, I don't intend to be a troublemaker. I'll be quiet and I'll be supportive and I'll do whatever the council wishes. But if the council feels like I do, then I think we should talk about it before we decide what we're going to do about a city manager. Thank you, sir. I'm finished.
Councilman Clare.
First, Tom, I want to thank you for your comments. I think any organization, business, social, governmental, has to have goals and has to have thoughts and plans. And I think in the way you put that, you're stating that we don't have a specific written goal stating what we're going to do this year, the next 5 years, 10 years. I do feel that we've made certain elements of that happen through our process with Sun Health, and some of the other things that we've done. Absolutely, crime is not a major issue, but we have citizens that have turned it into a major issue, so we've had to respond to that. I'm in agreement with you that we need to have open discussions as to Bill and Matthew and all that, but I do know that we did discuss it in a couple of meetings. And from my recollection, Matthew was brought on. And as we're going through these processes, we're going to want someone that's already part of the process, that is in tune with what we're doing, instead of having the build up speed beyond that. And I think all of us have a responsibility that if we have a thought or a concern of something that needs to be addressed, we need to get it agendized. I agree with you. City Center has gone on way too long without being brought up. And I asked for it to be on this agenda this month because I thought it had gone on too long, and we need to see shovels in the dirt and things happening. So in those process, I think you're right, but I think every one of us have a responsibility to make sure that the issues that we want to get approached are getting addressed. So, but I appreciate the conversation, and I think it's good conversation that we're having, Tom.
Councilman Brainerd Watson. You're on mute.
Sorry, trying to find the unmute button. I appreciate Tom's comments as well as Councilman Clare's. And I would second what Councilman Clare has said, because I remember distinctly our discussion being that we were going to move Matt into the position right now, and then we were going to spend some time discussing and surveying and coming up with what we really believe the position should be, coming up with a better job description of the position, defining it. And I know that we discussed the fact that we hadn't done a true, help me out with the word, review of of Bill, and that we wanted to make sure that we had things in place to be able to do that with whoever becomes the new city manager. So I don't feel like we just simply have ignored the issue there. I think we just are in the process of doing that. And I feel like one thing that's different is that business and civics run differently. I feel like while the Wigwam shared information with us, they shared some information with us that's maybe not privy to the entire population right at this point in time. And so opening it up to the, to the public meeting probably is not exactly in our best interest or theirs. I mean, there was nothing shared with them that anybody would probably not have surmised, since it was all about business levels and COVID. But I feel like our job is to discuss things when we have an action item, when we have something we're going to do about them, not simply just bring them up to discuss them. As far as the city center goes, the development of the city center, yeah, I think we need to be discussing it, even if it's just getting a progress report. And maybe that would be something great to get from the mayor, know who he's talked to, or if he's, can't know necessarily who he's talked to, but if he's had conversations going on. But again, we're kind of in that position where sometimes those conversations aren't going to be things we're going to be able to know about until there's something substantial to talk about. And we can't just go out and start moving dirt until we know who's going where and who's going to pay for what. Development doesn't just happen because we decide we're going to go and today start it. It has to be very thoughtful and very precisely done, or we waste the citizens' money. We won't be building buildings without knowing who's going into those buildings or having an idea of what kind of tenants are going to be in certain buildings and what kind of infrastructure needs are needed in different buildings. So although we'd like to be out there, putting in the infrastructure right now, some of that may be putting the cart before the horse. And as a fiscally responsible council, I just don't think we can do that now. Can we be looking at the entrance to entrance off Litchfield and making sure that we're planning for any infrastructure changes that are going to happen there? Absolutely. But I don't know that we can do too much more than that at this stage of the game. And so I guess that's really all I have. I think we're doing a pretty good job. I think that our planning, as Mayor Schoaf has said, takes place in different places. It's not as straightforward as it is in many other types of planning, where you sit down and create a long range plan. When I worked in the gas industry, I was amazed to see that the Deer Valley Unified School District did a 20-year plan, and they passed it out every 5 years. We had a big meeting, and they would give us a binder that had their 5-year plan, their 10-year plan, their 15-year plan, 20-year plan in there. And it baffled and amazed me that they could look that far into the future. Whether or not those plans were really able to see that far, I'm not really sure. I think sometimes we get a little bit ahead of ourselves, and we're responsible for spending taxpayer money. I think we have to err on the side of being frugal and responsible. And that's all I have.
Just a couple of comments about some of the things that Councilman Rostosi brought up. The city center is a topic that over the last 5 years has dominated our council in a variety of ways. That has been less in the last year, but for a variety of reasons, a part of which is COVID, in terms of its setting back the timetable for some of the steps. But even in the last year, we have taken some very important, we've made some very important progress and you're going to learn more about it tonight with a presentation from the city engineer that was planned to come on before the council anyway at about this time. But we have made decisions about about preferring a roundabout at Village Parkway. We've given direction to the city engineer to go through and do the design work on that. As a council, we have hired what's called a construction manager at risk. And that construction manager has been working with Woody Scouten, our engineer, and with the engineers that work on contract for us to do all of the engineering drawings so that we could get into a position to be able to do some of the things that need to be done on the infrastructure so we can make this look like a development. All of those things, unfortunately take significant time, and they're not things that in the interim you can come back and say anything more than we're working on the budget. I have been trying very hard to get to the point of bringing something to council just for knocking the wall down along Litchfield Road and putting in curb and gutter along that section of Litchfield, so it looked more like a development. Just to get that little step done required that we had all of the drainage and grading done for the project, so we understood where water was going to go and how it was going to get there, so that as the project was graded, so that you could put in some of these things, that we knew what to do with the dirt. We wanted, I think as a council, we've instructed the city engineer to get the initial plans put together for the first phase of the park. Again, we can't do anything on the park until we do a number of other steps from an engineering standpoint, so that we know how the park has to be graded, how it's got to be, where the streets are going to go, where the utilities are going to go. There's a tremendous number of things or questions that are technical that have to be answered before we can take the next step, which is to look at the plans and actually give some authority for the construction manager at risk to start bringing back these costs to us. And we can't do our job of prioritizing what we're going to do in the downtown area with the amount of money that we have set aside for this. We can't prioritize that until we understand what are these things going to cost. And understand what it's going to cost until we go through and actually do the engineering drawings that define what it is we're going to be buying from a construction person. So all these things that go on behind the scenes for the city center are not things that come back to council since the time that we've looked at the last year or so. And I didn't go back to try to look at actual agendas and see when we talked about it. But I know that we had a specific presentation on the construction manager at risk, going down that path as a better path for getting good costing on the cost of doing this infrastructure. I know we've looked at drawings on the roundabout and how the roundabout can fit in the area that we have around Village Parkway, what it does to the entrances on the east side for where city center is. We've had a huge number of meetings on what the basic layout of city center is in terms of parcels, and what those parcels generally look like and how they're bounded by streets. So all of those things have been discussed by council and have been, and direction, at least in general, has been given to the city engineer so that he could do his work along with the construction manager at risk. And all of that has been going on for the last year, and a tremendous amount has been accomplished, but it literally is all coming together in the report you're going to see tonight. In terms of the council review, the last 2 years, just a second, the last 2 years are the very first time in 14 years that we haven't done a formal review of a city manager. And the reason it wasn't done in the last 2 years is because a number of the council members refused to fill out the form. The form wasn't adequate. The form wasn't right. I don't know enough about what the city manager does. There were all kinds of excuses on why you couldn't participate in reviewing the city manager. So what has happened? The city manager went back to the drawing board and got the HR department to put together a new form, a new evaluation form. All of you were asked to have input into that new form. And the last thing that I heard from staff was that very few of you had actually made input. So that this responsibility of the council to do the review, I agree it needs to be done. Absolutely needs to be done. And we need to get much more serious about doing it. And if we don't like the form that we've got now, we need to make some very specific suggestions for how it can be changed so we can modify it and we can start using it, because the reviews need to be done. The issues that the Wigwam discussed with many of us are not issues that have action, or not issues that can properly come to this council. Trying to think if there was anything else. I think that's the majority of items that were brought up. It is important that we spend enough time to discuss these items as they become items that have potential action that the council can take. Some of the issues that we talked about with the wigwam resulted in us reaching out to the wigwam so that they applied for one of our economic grants. They had not done that until we reached out to them and said, hey, do you understand that these grants are available and you could possibly qualify? And we got them in touch directly with Paige so that they could get their application in. So there have been reactions to the wigwam, but those reactions have been the reactions that are appropriate for city staff to do. And when there's an action item such as awarding the money, it came to council and it was awarded. So I think that, I think the idea of making sure that we all understand what our goals are is something we could easily incorporate into our budget discussions to make sure that everybody understands that the reason we've put so much money in the capital budget for the city center is because we want to accomplish these general things. If you look at our capital plan, you'll see that the city center money is just in as a lump sum. And the reason is because we don't know what each of these things are going to cost. And so the very first thing we have to do is get a report like we're getting tonight to try to understand the costing so we can break that money up. But during that process of putting that budget together would be a good time for us to be very clear as a council on what is it we're trying to accomplish in the next several years, and how does that being answered with both the budget, operational budget we're adopting, and by the 5-year capital plan that we've put into the budget. More comments. Councilman Donahue.
I just want to get back to sort of I think the base of what Tom was saying, and that is that I think it was absolutely critical that we missed an evaluation of our city manager. And I say that because when I came on, we didn't have a city manager for a year, and Tom Schoaf, you were managing it, which was fine. And then in my opinion, I too didn't have very, very good response to things happening without him being told. But the bottom line is, I did reply to some of those things. A number of us did. We should have had a deadline. We should have had an evaluation, like it or not, because that's huge. And I think a lot of things would have been corrected. Secondly, the other side to this, which still confuses me, is we spend a lot of time in meetings, hours sometimes, talking about what should be staff things, like the location of the cameras, the surface of the pool decking, that kind of stuff, which I wouldn't think that we as a council should be spending our time doing. So that still confuses me as to what comes to council and what doesn't, and when it comes to council and when it doesn't. So just a couple little tidbits of I think I too got caught up in the city manager merry-go-round, which I would call, and I reached out to the mayor a number of times to say, like, what's his role and what does he do? So I was confused. Maybe with an evaluation, I would have understood better. So I just want to defend that and say that I agree a bit with Tom Rostosi.
Well, we are going to have an evaluation form put together one way or the other, because it has to happen. We have not done our duty in terms of being fair to the city manager and whoever the city manager is by not doing any evaluations. That should not have happened. So I agree wholeheartedly with that. In terms of what comes to council, what comes to council is any expenditure of funds more than $10,000. We have granted the city manager and staff the ability to contract and obligate the city for up to $10,000. So anything above that is going to come to council. And then it's a question of how much discussion does any individual councilman want on a particular item to feel satisfied that they are spending the people's money in a responsible way. So that's an issue that is it's council driven. In some cases, nobody wants to, nobody particularly wants to discuss it, and it goes through very quickly. In other cases, there are questions about it, and it takes time to go through and flesh those questions out, and that is just part of the process of of how a council works. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of great comments, questions, and everything. I appreciate everybody's involvement. I had a couple of things I want to just kind of address real quick that have been sort of talked about. There was a question about, the priorities, where we're going to be in a number of years and stuff. We're about to do that, I think, again this year with the budget. We have the capital improvement project list, and we put that together. We prioritize it every year. And then we try to figure out how much money we've got and how much money we want to spend. And that helps us, gives us an idea how far down that list we're actually going to get in that year. Any council member has a right to put something on that list, that CIP list, if they want to have it considered. Now, it'll be the council as a whole that figures out the priority of what goes, of those things on that list. But we've all got a right, if we've got a project that we think needs to be done, we got an obligation. If we have a project that we think that needs to be done, to get it on the list, to get it, to talk about it. And the time is going to be coming up here in the next few months during budget, where we're talking about CIP. And we'll be prioritizing all those goals and how we expect to spend this money over a number of years. Second, we all have an obligation as council members, if we think there's something that needs to be talked about, to get it put on the agenda so we can talk about it legally. I've not seen a circumstance where the mayor has refused to put something on the agenda when it was asked of him to put it on the agenda. But if he were to do that, all it takes is, under our code, is any two council members to sign a form and turn it into the city manager, and it goes on the agenda. So if there is something that you think that we need to talk about, that we skipped, that we've missed over, I think we all have an obligation to get it to the mayor, and if not the mayor, then to the manager with the form, and get it put on the agenda so we can talk about those issues. The city center project. We're the government and we work slow. And I hate to say that, and I find it extremely frustrated. I'm a business person. I'm a contractor, and I like to see things move fast because I can decide how much money I want to spend and when I want to spend it. There are a lot of protections built in for the citizens on how the government goes about spending money. And those protections make it more expensive for us to do projects and make it slow. A lot of my updating on what's happening with the city center is I go through the engineers' reports every month in our agenda packet and look and see what's happening. That kind of gives me a big idea where they're at, and that they are still working on it, and they're moving forward. COVID hasn't helped. A lot of projects have run slow, but I'm kind of hoping that we're going to get this thing moving a little bit quicker. And I agree. I think there were some comments at the last meeting that maybe we should have this as an agenda item every month. And I support that, at least to be able to talk about it and to have a quick report like we do with the Historical Society as to what's going on with the city center. Because it is our biggest project that we're working on. The last thing is the cameras and talking about the locations. That was mentioned a couple of times. The camera contract had to come to us. We had to talk about the camera contract. We had to, because we're spending that much money. It's up to the council to decide whether we're going to enter into that, whether we want to do it. I looked at the locations of the cameras, not so much as micromanaging, but as each of us having an obligation to look into those locations, because we know the communities, we know the neighbors, we know the streets, we know the entrances. We have been here far longer than most, if not all, of our staff. And we are better able probably to anticipate what kind of kickback we're going to get when we start putting cameras up out there on all these intersections. And we still may get that kickback that comes. So I don't see that as overreaching. I mean, the staff is really making the final decisions of where they're going to go, but we're looking at it and telling them, hey, do we need them here? Do you want them here? What about these people? Are they going to be complaining later because we forgot them? And maybe staff didn't even know that was an area that we needed to look at. So that's all I got. Thanks, Tom.
Any comments from anyone else as we are running time, and we can go directly into our other meeting if we're finished with this, including comment whether we need another work study to talk about, in more detail. So I saw first Councilman Brandon Watson had her hand up.
I would just add on the cameras that staff came to us with camera locations already pinpointed. So they came prepared with their job done, and we just asked questions on it.
Councilman Rostos.
I would just throw out with respect to doing reviews of the city manager, that ultimately the only really fair way to do a review after the city manager's been on the job for a year is that we told the city manager when he started or she started what we expected at the end of the first year. So we have something that they know and understand is what the expectation is, and that a year later their performance is going to be judged against. So I think it's more than just doing the actual review, which obviously we haven't done, but in all fairness to our next city manager, whether it's Matthew or somebody else, when they start, we should be able to sit down with them, I think, as a council and tell them this is what we expect, so that a year later when we do their review, we have that to measure it against.
I agree.
Yeah, and that, that just to be fair to, to the individuals who have been city manager in the past, they do have a very detailed job description, and they are subject to review on everything that's in that job description. That's where the review starts, is are they getting their jobs done? If the council wants to change the job description or to tell the city manager that you only need to do these 10 things out of your job description, we can do that. If we decide as a council to do that, I would say that's probably not a good idea. It is a situation where the city manager should know what we're going to look at. But I'm not comfortable telling the city manager that we're not going to look at the things that are in the job description. Also, generally during the time that we had a more stable situation, we did have individual goals that were established by the council each year that said, here are 4 things that you need to work on specifically. They're sub goals, if you will. In Darrell's case, 1 year he spent, or maybe several years he spent working on the solution that we came up with on fire and emergency services. So that was on his job description for his review for a number of years. There were other things with a particular road project or something that we had going on that would find its way onto that review form. So that is something that has been done in the past and is a good idea going forward. It should be clear what is it that the council is trying to accomplish in some of these areas, and then the city manager has responsibility to work on it. So that's something that we need to make sure that it continues in the future and is incorporated into this new instrument that we're trying to get together. So at this point, I'm going to not schedule another work study at our next meeting. We'll see how it goes. If there are questions, it may be that the next most appropriate session like this would be a work study session, maybe on the city manager job description and then individual goals as they go forward as part of our budget discussions, which will also be starting here shortly. Councilman Brandon Watson.
As that discussion will inevitably lead to discussing performance and issues with previous city manager, can that be done under executive session? Because I feel like that's something that should probably be handled not in a public forum.
Well, we need to ask our new city attorney, Mr. Estes, what his opinion is on that. And I see his nameplate here, although not his face, so I'm assuming he's here. But
Mayor,
we'll see.
he is here, but he had to step away to file a police report.
All right, well, we'll make sure that we have it appropriately agendized so that if there are discussions that need to be in executive session, they can be. Although I would generally counsel the council that we don't want to make this discussion of the city manager's job description and review form or evaluation process, we don't want to make that about prior city managers. We want to make it about, we want to make it about going forward. So. Okay, with that, I'm going to call this meeting to an end, and I'll give everybody, do you want like 2 minutes to go get a glass of water, or do you want to just go immediately into our next meeting? Give me an idea before I wrap this close. 2 minutes. All right, we're going to have 2 minutes.
Mayor, can I get a motion?
Well, I suppose for a work study, you want a motion?
Yes,
So
please.
moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Claire, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned for 2 minutes. I have 7:17 on my clock, so I'll try to wrap this up or call it back to order about 7:19.
Thank you.
Tom pisses me off. We did this whole, I mean, I'm not on. Let me make sure.
Okay, we're actually at about 7:20. We're going to call the regular meeting of the city council to order. Wrap. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? If you'd all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we'll get this started with mayor and councilman reports. Councilman Stosi, do you have anything to report?
No, sir.
Okay, Councilman Donahue.
You know what? Come back to me. I got to write something down. I got to look for something.
Come back to you. Okay. All right, let's go to Councilman Clare.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
All right, is Councilman Romack here? I don't see him. All right, Councilman Brainerd Watson.
I would just like to report that people in the community have approached me and talked to me about the work being done over at the rec center and how pleased they are with the look of the wall, and how they really appreciate the efforts that we've put into that, and how it looks good.
That's good. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Just two things real quick. I had the honor with my son, and Sonny had the honor with his son of swearing them in for the Recreations and Public Grounds Committee, that commission last week. It truly was an honor. They're both local bred Eagle Scouts, anxious to give back to the community. I mean, they're 30-something-year-old men now, but they're anxious to give back to the community. They're raising their families here. And it's encouraging to see the kids move back here and to get involved and to be involved with the community. And it was really quite an honor to watch both of them. The second thing is, I was approached by the ranchers and farmers, one of their board of directors. That director sits on another board with me, wanting to know how to go about getting with the city for a project. I sent the email off to Matthew, copied the mayor, and said, hey, can you set something up so they can do what it is they want to do? So we had a Zoom call. It's the group that wants to take over the two abandoned houses next to the ones that the Litchfield Park Historical Society is going to take and do their project in conjunction with the Historical Society. It looks like a great project. They've looked at the buildings. They're happy with it. They have estimates of over $1 million to put into those buildings, to rehab them as a museum and the offices for their operation. And it looks like they would be a real great work in conjunction with the Historical Society. And it would be another pot of money to help put some of the improvements up there that need to be done for, driveways and parking and utilities and stuff like that. So, our response back to them was, you don't have anything to present yet. When you get your presentation together, let's get it back to council and see how this whole thing goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Donahue, are you ready now?
I'm ready. Yeah, sorry.
Back at you.
Yeah, I want to thank Matthew, and I think Lisa and I, we are trying to reignite the sign funding, sign auction for the Historical Society. So I know we've talked about that before. But secondly, as I will be sworn in today, I would like to just say, God bless our country as we move forward with a new team. I think that's awesome. And secondly, I do know many of you know that we have some very prominent citizens that are right now suffering from COVID. So please, please, please say prayers for everybody, but in particular, some of those that are close to us here in Litchfield. That's all.
Okay, thank you. I think the only thing that I want to add, tag on with what the Vice Mayor said, we did have a good meeting over Zoom with the I think it's the Three Rivers Historic Society that is interested in using the two houses that are just below the Paul Litchfield's home that's going in for the museum, which is it's very encouraging if they want to take on those two buildings, because it'll help us in getting the hilltop to where the entire hilltop is presentable. Matthew and I, our city manager and I, also had an opportunity to meet with Sun Health in the form of Paul Vanderveen. I can see Paul's here with us tonight. We had a good conversation about their plans for the Loma and the fact that they've got a ribbon cutting ceremony coming up. They're moving forward with the farming operation up in the corner, kind of near where the road, Denny Boulevard, kind of dead ends into the hilltop. So they're moving forward, and it's I think they're excited about the progress that they've been able to make now that they've gotten their permits and their zoning approvals. So it was a very positive meeting with Sun Health. And with other than that, I think I'm going to just move on, because we've actually even though we have a short agenda, it may take some time because we have a lot of information I think that we're going to get from Mr. Scouten. So we'll go on. I'm sorry.
Just so there's no confusion, you mentioned we met with the Three Rivers Historical Society. It was the Farmers and Ranchers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bad name.
Yeah, just so everybody understands, we got the right. Yeah, don't get any confusion with them. Yeah.
So you can put it on the record. It's one more name I screwed up. Farmers
and Ranchers, Ranchers and Farmers.
Yep. Not Three Rivers.
Yes.
Okay. So the next item is a report from the Litchfield Heritage Center. We have word that tonight there will not be a report. So we're going to go on to the city manager's report. And I want to preface the city manager's report with just some comments to make sure that the council saw the request the city manager made about input back from council on the Friday report that he sends out to everybody. This city manager's report and what it was intended to be in this agenda, if you go back to when we put it here, it was intended to eliminate the need to have detailed reports from all of the department heads at every council meeting. So the reason that there's an engineer's report in here, or there's a code enforcement report, or there's a building safety report, or report from the clerk, all of those reports used to be verbal reports given to council at least once a month. And what would happen because of that is that our council meeting that might normally get over at 9 would get over at 10:30. And the council decided that we would rather try to get these meetings done by 9 and have an opportunity to read the reports and then ask questions if they came up, instead of having the individual reports given to council verbally at every other council meeting. So there are very detailed reports in here. And the vice mayor was spot on when he said, look at the engineer's report, because generally you can find out a tremendous amount of activity that goes on in a variety of topics if you look at that engineer's report. And then the city manager report that gets sent out every Friday, the original intent of that was to provide an opportunity for the city manager to communicate with the council on things that were going on that the council should know about, and unfortunately that report evolved into a situation where it was a very detailed report, detailed weekly report from every department that got into things that the council probably for the most part wasn't that interested in. And so by having a report that might be 5 pages long, when it could be instead 1 page or 2 pages long, I'm sure a lot of council members ended up not reading the 5-page report to find out the 2 or 3 things that you ought to find out about, because you just only have so much time. So I have asked the interim city manager, Matthew, to take a look at that report and to get with council and find out from you, what is it that's of interest to you, to get some examples so that he could make that report much more tailored, so that he was communicating to you the types of things that you as a councilman need to know are going on, but we don't get into the detail of how many people are we interviewing for maintenance tech 3. I mean, we got way beyond what we needed to do in this report, in that individual Friday report. The reports that are here on the council agenda are gonna, they should contain a lot of detail, because you can go through those and get the detail you may want on a once a month basis. But on the Friday reports, those reports are done only for the benefit of council. So I would urge each of you to talk to the city manager and make it clear what kinds of things do you want to see in those reports so that he can make them fit your needs. So with that, we'll go on to the city manager report for this meeting. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would second what the mayor said. I sent out the reports yesterday for last week and the week before. Again, please look over those and look and see what you think is useful, what is not. Your time is valuable. Staff puts a lot of time into these and sending over information. And again, only you can tell us what you feel like you need to see. So again, please look over those and let us know. You have the manager's report in your packet. Just a few things I would hit on just for your information. Our preschool did resume on January the 4th. We've worked closely with Litchfield Park School District to see what they're doing. Their preschool also has opened. However, K through 8 is still closed. It's still virtual learning. And the reason why is because there's different rules for preschool kids versus elementary school kids. But anyway, our preschool again did reopen January 4th, and they are doing well and following COVID protocols. And so far, everything has been great. As far as the business assistance grants, the phase 1 recipients have had their checks issued. Those have been done. You will see the next round on the agenda for approval tonight. On the city center point, you would notice in the engineer's report that we have now received the 90% paving and grading plans for reviews, and Woody is working on those. Construction has started on the Denny's just south of Camelback on Dysart, if you've noticed that. I had several points to mention to you guys, but you already covered in your councilman report, so thank you for that. The Trout Derby is this Saturday morning from 7:30 to 3:30. It's going to be an interesting one due to COVID, so I invite you to come there and check it out, and it should work well. We look forward to seeing that, and the rec department will do a great job with that as always. My last thing I would tell you is something, of course, you already know is COVID numbers continue to climb. If you saw the COVID numbers in this report, it was the last time they had been done since December. On December, there was 1,829 cases in the zip code. When this report was prepared, there was 2,747. So a large increase in that amount of time. But again, it is what it is. It's after the holidays, after Thanksgiving, Christmas, a lot of people getting together. As you know, my family had it. So hopefully they'll start going down soon. The last thing I would say is thank you for the 3 council members that have taken the time to come meet with me. If you haven't yet, I would encourage you to, please. I look forward to meeting with you all individually and seeing what goals, concerns you have for the city and for this office. And look forward to working with you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Next item is an
Question?
introduction. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. One of the things, Matthew, that I find very important to me, on planning, you've got 2 applications for process review by Design Review Board. It doesn't say what they were. We all get asked questions on a regular basis. What's being built here? What's being planned here? What's going on there? So I don't do a good job of looking at the Design Review Board minutes. And we used to have a Design Review Board summary or something in our packets. So maybe just a little bit more information so we know what's happening. That would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Okay, anything else from council? All right, next item on the agenda is the introduction of new employees. I don't know if we have any of these employees with us tonight.
Jack is with us.
Hello, Jack. So we have, Jack, I'm gonna introduce you, Jack, as Jack, and then I'm gonna ask you if you could properly pronounce your last name so I don't butcher it.
It's Delamontagne.
Delamontagne. Tane?
Yep.
Delamontagne.
Yep,
Well,
Tane,
welcome.
Delamontagne.
Delamontagne.
Yep.
Jack is a youth sports assistant. Welcome to our rec center. Hopefully it will be an enjoyable place for you to work and you will enjoy working with the youth of the community.
Yep, thank you. Everybody's been very nice so far, and I'm looking forward to what the future holds here.
Great. Well, welcome on board. We also have hired a public works maintenance technician, Julia Compton, and a public works maintenance technician, Raul Rivera. So welcome to those 2 maintenance techs. Hopefully they will enjoy their jobs and they'll do a good job of keeping our public areas well maintained. Next item is employee of the quarter. And I think the council is all, I think you all know how important I think this Employee of the Quarter award is. It is recognition by a staff member, by other staff members, that this particular individual staff member was the best of all the staff at doing a good job, not only for the residents, but also being helpful to to other staff in terms of being able to get their jobs done. Our Employee of the Quarter is Stacy Frederico, and I see Stacy as normally we give out gift certificates, but Stacy got a gift of 8 hours of vacation time. And so I don't know, see if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you chose to have vacation time over time with your fellow staff members, now that you're the Employee of the Quarter, maybe that's sending the wrong message. I'm not sure. But if you'd like to say anything, you're more than welcome. We're very proud of you, and we're happy for the contributions that you make to our city.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to work for the city.
Okay, thank you. Normally we'd give you a rousing round of applause and take your picture, but we're gonna have to pass on that.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thanks.
Okay, next item of information comes from Mr. Williams concerning the license plate reader system.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, you remember we've been discussing this for several months now. When we originally approached the system, there was 3 prerequisites you put in place before the purchase could go forward. One of those was that Flock Safety would guarantee the price for future cameras. You may remember they have guaranteed that price for the next 2 years, which is the terms of the contract. The second prerequisite was that we identify the camera locations. That has been done, which you will remember from previous meetings. The third one was the approval of the MOU. The MOU was approved by the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors last week. I do have that signed document in hand. So again, that was the 3 prerequisites on this deal. From speaking with Flock Safety, it's my understanding they're expecting about 8 weeks from the beginning of camera installs to the system actually be up and running. Of course, it takes time to install 32 cameras. They have to do blue stakes on some of these, as you might imagine, a few hoops to jump through, but we're looking at about roughly 8 weeks. This item was pre-approved for this purchase of cameras. It will be $88,000 for the first year. That's $80,000 for the cameras, and that's $8,000 for the installation. After that, it will be again $2,500 per camera per year. Councilman Claire, do you have a question on this item, sir?
It might be a stupid question, but at the monthly cost that we have, are they charging us a monthly fee from when they first start, since it's an 8-week installation process, or when they completed services?
No, sir. We get a 30-day free trial once the cameras are actually installed and up and running to make sure we like the system. If for any reason that 30 days we don't like it, we don't know a dime. We actually don't get invoiced till that 30-day trial period is over.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next item is the city center update. This item is on for information, but we hope that we'll have comments from the council, so we get some sense of the council's reaction to the various items that have been worked on from an engineering standpoint. I'm hopeful that there will be some information in there, and to the extent there's some information there, we're going to maybe hear from our Finance Director, Paige Peterson, on how much she believes we have in our bank account that we could safely spend on these kinds of projects. All of this information, I want to make sure that you have it, because we're going to be scheduling a follow-up to this in which we will be asking the council to set some goals and priorities, really priorities on getting some of this infrastructure started, and committing some funds to the construction manager that we have, who I believe is ready to start getting some of this accomplished. So information from the council in terms of information back to the city engineer will be helpful. And with that, Mr. Scouten, the mic is yours. I hope Mr. Scouten's. I thought I saw him just a minute ago.
He's here, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute. So Terry, if you could make Woodrow the presenter. Can everybody see that?
No.
You need to start your video.
Okay, well, it's on my computer and I signed in as Woodrow.
Yeah,
Make
I need you to
Woodrow.
start your video on your computer.
I don't have video on my computer. I
Oh,
should be
no.
able to share the screen.
If you don't have video, it won't share the screen.
Okay, I've done that before. Hang on.
Oh, you did something.
Okay,
Here it is.
there we go. Okay. So let me start at the beginning here.
You can probably maximize, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. So Mayor and Council, thank you very much for this opportunity to tell you about all the hard work we've been doing over the last year. And let me just give you a kind of a recap of some of that real quickly, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do here in the near future. So this is just a list of some of the things that we have developed over the last year or so. We've done subsurface soil testing. As the mayor mentioned, we selected Aiken Gardner as our construction manager at risk. We took the original plan that was developed and we refined that and slightly, tweaked some of the street layouts and came up with design details that would work with the kind of vehicles that we're expecting. We went through an extensive process with the RPG Commission to come up with the 2.5 acre park plan. We literally started with a list of, 40 items or so that the various commissioners wanted to see in the park, and we winnowed that down to what you see. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that here in a second. We also prepared an option B for the plan, which would allow the parcel 5 buildings to front directly on the park. We later decided that that probably isn't the best idea. We also have gone through an extensive roundabout design process. I'll show you that. We prepared landscape, hardscape, and monument signage concepts for the entire project. We've done the grading and drainage design for the whole 30 acres. One of the most frustrating things on the project was getting the utility companies to pay attention to us and figure out a way that they can serve the whole 30 acres. They're very busy, and it was tough getting them on board. And then I think somebody mentioned that our construction plans for the streets and all the grading and drainage, the roundabout and everything is currently at about 90%. So again, I want to talk about the drainage design for a second. One of the things that I decided to do was to utilize the south half of the park as the stormwater retention system. And so what that means is that underneath that lawn, we will have large tanks that will store all of the stormwater runoff from the property, including all the 5 building pads, or actually it's 6 building pads. And that way the developers of each pad, all they have to do is connect to a storm drain. They don't need to figure out what they're going to do with their own stormwater, their own drainage. Also, the drainage design includes a temporary stormwater detention basin on parcel 1. I'll show you where that will be until we're able to get the downtown storm drain project completed in late 2022. As I mentioned, storm drain connections to each parcel. The water system has all been completely designed for the whole 30 acres, and it's been approved by Liberty Utilities. Each parcel has a domestic, or will have a domestic and fire line extended to it. And one of the things that kind of surprised us was that we had to replace quite a few of the existing water lines, not only because of age, but also because they were too small and too shallow. The sewer system has been completely designed and approved.
Excuse me just for 1 second, Mr. City Engineer, Mr. Skelton. Can you go back to the water issue?
Sure.
We are planning on having some 2-story and even potentially 3-story buildings in this city center development. And one of the discussions that we've had with other people who are building stuff in this area is that Liberty Water doesn't necessarily have enough water pressure in their system to adequately to supply a 2-story or 3, and certainly not a 3-story building with water. That they may not meet even the minimum requirements that are out there for water pressure in the system for things like fire hydrants. So that's something to get in, take a look at very quickly and understand, is this an issue? And because I thought that all of the improvements that were made to their system that went in about, I don't know, 2 years ago, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, up on the north side of town, making the system be a loop type system, was supposed to cure this issue with water pressure. And it sounds like not have done that. So we need to look at this ahead of time so we don't wait until we get our first building and find out we don't have enough water pressure to run a sprinkler system on the 3rd floor.
Yeah, Mayor, yeah, that was, actually, I was aware of that concern. That was one of the first things I did was I literally went out there and tested the pressure myself in the downtown area, and we're going to be okay. We have about 65 PSI at City Hall. The problem that you're referring to is along Camelback Road and north of Camelback Road. For some reason, we have higher pressure in the downtown area, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So the sewer system design, again, we had to replace quite a bit of the existing sewer system because it was very shallow and old. And that is a live sewer line that runs down through there with flows from the Loloma area. So we're going to have to replace that sewer with it being live, and that's not an easy thing, but there are ways to do that. So we'll be doing that. And again, sewer services will be provided to each parcel as well as the park. The dry utilities, meaning electric, gas, and telecommunications, those designs are completed now. And the contractor is currently working on the GMP, and I'll explain what that is here in a second. And then lastly, we are working on a public utilities easement, which I'll be bringing to the council for all of the streets to allow the utilities to go in and maintain their facilities once they're built. So this is the current overall plan. If you can see my cursor, you can see the roundabout here on Litchfield Road, Wigwam Boulevard, Old Litchfield Road. Here's the current commercial center, City Hall, Scout Lodge up here. So this is the current plan. We tweaked this street to the north a little bit to push it up closer to the church. But other than that, the plan is pretty much the same. And, we tweaked the roundabouts a little bit as well. So all of these, this is parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3, parcel 4 is the park, parcel 5 over here, and then parcel 6 here. So the direction that I was given was to prepare construction plans, design and prepare construction plans for the phase 1 infrastructure. And you can see that here. Again, it's the roundabout. What isn't shown here is some of the reconstruction of Litchfield Road that we'll have to do north and south of the roundabout. But basically, it's the extension of Village Parkway into the city center area to this second roundabout, which is the Desert Avenue alignment. As shown in the plan, eventually that will be punched out to Old Litchfield Road. But this is what we're going to, and the park. So this is what we're going to build in the first phase. A little bit about the roundabout. This is the final design that we ended up with. And you can see quite a bit of realignment of Litchfield Road, north and south of the roundabout, a little bit of work in Village Parkway, and of course the connection into the city center. Here's a little bit closer look at it. This drawing includes a pedestrian crossing here on Litchfield Road, which we have since decided to take out because of pedestrian safety. Litchfield Road currently carries 22,000 vehicles a day. And what the nice thing about roundabouts is that the traffic never stops. The bad thing about roundabouts is that the traffic never stops. And, trying to cross without traffic coming to a stop is a little bit iffy. So we've decided to take that pedestrian crossing out. You'll be able to cross here and here on Village Parkway. The park phasing plan, but let me talk a little bit about the park itself. So we came up with this plan again by working very closely with the RPG, and it includes a play zone up here, a playground, if you will, that has kind of an aviation theme to it. We've got a restroom, we've got an entry feature here, an entry monument feature, a large palm plaza, which is tables and chairs and, shady spots to sit. A nice entrance sidewalk here, which we think will eventually be paired up with a sidewalk on the other side through parcel 5 between the buildings that will give access to parking, behind the buildings. This is a water feature that's kind of the babbling brook idea with tables and chairs next to it. This is a splash pad, so some more nice shady areas here. Some water feature, what do they call this? Water seat features, I guess. Anyway, it's a basically a seat that has a waterfall or something built into it. This circular plaza here is planned primarily as kind of a meeting node, a meeting place, and has an overlook over the amphitheater. So right at this point here, the ground will drop off about 3 or 4 feet into the garden area. And then you'll have the amphitheater here. So you can stand here and kind of watch what's going on in the amphitheater. Somebody on city staff, I think it's the current interim city manager, had the idea of putting a carousel in here. And so we've included that in the process, in the plans. And then this is a small memorial garden here, which would have a clock tower and have the Blue Star Memorial, also a peace pole, and maybe something else here. I think the clock tower I would like to see be a kind of a tribute to Paul Litchfield. We'd have maybe a couple plaques on there talking about him and what he did for the area here. And then the big event lawn down here, and then this is where the drainage would be stored underneath that I mentioned earlier. And then a second restroom here. Now the phasing phase 1 would basically be the west half of the park. So we build this sidewalk around the other sides, and everything that's shown in the phase 1 area here, except for the carousel and the playground area. And we think that that makes it a very, very usable park space for people to sit and walk their dog or throw their frisbee or whatever. So here's what's included in the phase. I've already mentioned this, so I won't go through it again real quickly, but the estimated cost of the phase 1 of the park is about $1.9 million. And then phase 2 would be the aviation play zone with an estimated cost of about $430,000. Phase 3 is the event lawn. So that's, again, to remind you, that's this area over here with the restroom, the clock tower and so on. Let's see, phase 3 is the public, the second public restroom, about 225,000 for that. And then phase 4 is the amphitheater, the education garden, and the carousel. And I think we've got about $400,000 in there for a carousel, but we need to think about that because there's operational and maintenance issues that we might want to consider before we pull the push the button on that one. Anyway, about $725,000. So the park total estimated cost, all phases, about 3.2 million. So right now, what we're doing is finishing up the utilities, construction plans, and giving those to our contractor, Aiken Gardner, who's been on board since I think August, and working with us very closely on helping us put these plans together. They're working on the GMP. They won't give me a number yet, but I'm estimating that the utilities cost is about $2 million, and that's water and sewer and the dry utilities. And I would expect to bring that to you at your March meeting to approve GMP number 1 and go ahead and authorize that construction for the utility work, which means they'd be starting in in April. And then as that's getting rolling, then we're finishing up the construction plans for the phase 1 improvements, and that would be GMP. By the way, GMP is guaranteed maximum price. So that's why they call it construction manager at risk. We get a price from the contractor that says this is the maximum that this amount of work will cost. So we're wrapping up the plans for the phase 1 construction, which again includes Litchfield Road, roundabout, Village Parkway extension, grading and drainage for the entire 30 acres, phase 1 of the park, and that's an estimated cost of about 6.6 million. And I would hope to bring that to you at your June meeting so that the contractor could start on that in July. So one of the things I want to touch on real quickly is that the cost of the first phase is always a little bit higher than the subsequent phases. And that's because we're putting in things that benefit the subsequent phases. For example, we're mass grading almost all of the 30 acres. We're not going to touch the areas where we currently use for event overflow parking. Because we just, we need to keep that available. But the rest of the site will be mass graded. We're putting in drainage and stormwater retention facilities for the entire site. So when a new building comes on, all they need to do is connect to a storm drain. All of the water and sewer infrastructure will be installed with stubs extended to all of the pads, and same thing with the dry utilities. And then we'll have the west half of the park completed except for the playground area. Tonight, I want to propose that the city also move ahead with construction of the first building on the city center. We need to get some momentum going, get some buzz going. And the way to do that is to have the infrastructure in place, but you also need people coming and going from the site to get other people interested in coming and investing in it. So I'm proposing that the city go ahead and be the developer of the first building, to go ahead and build it on parcel 2. And again, let me explain that parcel 1 and parcel 2 are the only parcels that front on the infrastructure that we'll be building. The other parcels won't have an infrastructure in front of them. So it either has to be on this parcel 1 or parcel 2. Parcel 1 will have the interim drainage facilities until we get the storm drain in another year or so. So that leaves parcel 2 as the option. So what we would do, and again, we would develop it, build it, act as the landlord, go out and find tenants, enter into leases. My thought is that it would be a 2-story building with a total of about 20 to 25,000 square feet. Retail on the first floor, offices on the second floor. And again, I want to highlight the need to get retail into the city center because again, the main purpose of the city center is to not only provide a great amenity for the community, but also to generate sales tax revenue. We'd also have to extend La Loma Avenue, a short distance. We'd have to build at least part of this parking lot back here. And then of course, do some site development. And you know, again, I'm not an architect, I'm not a building contractor, but my estimate is about $5 million for the shell building itself. Okay, now schedule, I've already talked a little bit about this. So the utilities will be, hopefully we'll have that under construction at the beginning of April. That's probably going to take, this is an ambitious schedule. I think some of this might drag out a little bit, but to start in April and have about a 3 or 4 month construction period. And then as that's getting underway, then we'll have the phase 1 plans coming in right behind it, coming to council in June to approve that GMP number 2, and then start construction on the phase 1 in July. Again, 6 months is reasonable. It may drag out a little bit beyond that, but I think that's a good time period. And then if we decide to go ahead with the parcel 2 building, then of course, the first step is to select an architect and go through all of that. Building programming, preliminary design, take it to DRB and council to approve the design. We have to select a contractor. The contractor and the architect would work together on the final plans. Come back to council in December with a construction contract, and then start construction in January. And you know, again, I think that's probably a 5-month project to build that building on parcel 2. And that's all I have, Mayor.
All right, well, you get it. You gave us a lot to chew on. I'd like to get comments from council. I've got some comments, but I will save those just so because I'd like to hear from the council first. So who would like to speak first? I don't see a lot of hands up. We're gonna have to, you know, I'm working from a very small screen here, so oh, there I've got everybody again. Okay, so Councilman Donahue. So
I have a quick question, Woody. Where is the pedestrian bridge located on there? I might have not seen it on the map.
Yeah, can we get that back up again?
And while you're looking for that, it's the second part of my question, and that is, I'm not a golfer, so I don't go over the tunnel very much, but the wigwam, I call it the wigwam tunnel. Is that easy access for people to cross? Or maybe in the future, a pedestrian bridge, if needed, could go at Village Parkway. But anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah, the pedestrian underpass is right here. So you're right. If pedestrians can't cross here, then they're gonna have to come down to the underpass or the crosswalk down here.
Yeah.
At
Or the wigwam.
The cart path underpass is right here. So yeah, they could, you know, and we will have, I didn't mention that, but we will have, there's a bridge right here, the old La Loma Bridge over the airline canal.
Okay, so it's a little one.
Tied in so that we've got good pedestrian access up into the Loma. So yeah, pedestrians could come in that way as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm just thinking about, you know, if that starts to be an issue where lots of people want to cross there, but that's down the road. Okay, thank you.
No, yeah, that's a great point. A great point, and I'm glad you mentioned it because that gives me a chance to highlight how the pedestrians will access it.
Yeah,
and golf carts as well too.
Mm-hmm.
The underpass that's to the north is the city owns it, so we feel to use that as you know, for pedestrians as well as the golf carts. Councilman Clare.
Woody, great presentation. Just as a quick thought on the dry utilities. As we're putting the dry utilities in, any allotment or anything in consideration for making sure there's Wi-Fi available that the city could have for residents? I think that'd be a great thing to do.
Yes, Councilman Claire, we did think about that very early in the process and talked to our IT consultant, and he said it's a really very simple thing to do. What we'll do is have a room in the first restroom that we put in and have the equipment in there, and then it's a matter of putting the various transmitters, around the city center so that they'll have access to public Wi-Fi. I don't have that in the first phase. That will be, in a later phase, a second phase.
Thank you, sir.
Questions? Councilman Brandon Watson.
Sorry about that. Woody, you said, I think, did I understand you correctly that the building would be a shell, not developed inside?
Yeah, typically what you want to do is to put up the building so it's, what you're doing is at the same time that you're designing and building it, you're out there attracting tenants. So theoretically, the minute that you finish construction on the shell building, you're entering into a TI construction contract with a contractor to go ahead and build the TIs for the first tenants that want to come in. So we finished the shell building, and as we're doing that, we're attracting tenants and signing leases, and then the contractor comes in and builds the tenant improvements, for those particular tenants.
Okay.
More comments, Councilman Clare.
Any concern about the city being a landlord at the same time as we've got other vendors looking to lease the space?
Well, that's why I talked to our city attorney about this process to make sure that we weren't going to trip over, some kind of a statute that would prevent us from doing that. I don't see it so much as a competitive issue as more trying to get the ball rolling and trying to get some serious interest by other building developers in the project. If all you have is dirt sitting there, they're not even going to talk to you. If you have the infrastructure in place, that's, better. But if you actually have a building that you're in the process of actively leasing up, that's the best. Then you can say, we've got other people who are interested in being in this location. Why don't you come on in and build a building too?
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Well, thank you. One of the things that may happen is we start moving dirt out there and getting things going. A lot of these parties that have expressed interest may come and want to build a building anyway. And so we may not even get to the stage of needing to build a building to spark it. Getting something done out there is really, really important. Getting the wall down, getting the road in, getting these pads ready so they can be developed. Because we've had a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people that have an interest. I've heard of a lot of people that have an interest, but we're not at a stage yet where we can give them anything. And these first phase or two would do that without even jumping to the third phase or the building phase.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Mr. Vice Mayor. Councilman Donahue.
Well, and until we get started, we don't even know how much space we have for whom. Like I've talked to a couple of people that couldn't afford the building, but they would love to rent something. So until we find, and the other question I have is, one of those plans showed moving City Hall. Wasn't that in and around that area? Like would we move our existing facility into that building possibly?
Yes, that's true. That has been discussed. And keep in mind, this is just conceptual up here in parcel 2. This was originally shown as a church expansion in the original plan. I don't know if the church is going to want to follow through on that, but this was the location for the possible future City Hall up here. I think this would be better as a user building, for retail, office, whatever. tenant building, City Hall here, and then maybe something in the future over here.
Okay, additional comments? Well, it gives us a lot to think about, Woody, particularly with, with the cost of some of them. And I don't know if Paige has something she would like to offer us or not. But either way, what I would like to be able to do is in the next month, so sometime before, if you're planning on coming back to us in March, I would like to, we'll try to schedule a work study that focuses only on this topic. And it's really the topic the topic really is is the phasing of this exactly what we really need to do to accomplish the goal of making the project more likely to be developed by private investors. So some of the things that are in this initial phase, like the roundabout and building Village Parkway, and in at least a portion of the way, I think are clearly needed to be done. I don't know if the phasing that you have proposed on the park is exactly what would be most cost effective, but I think we can talk about those things. And we need to take a look at within the list of things that you have in your phases, as much as possible, some cost items for each of the steps. How's the cost broken out? So we can try to make sure that we figure out the financial aspects of this decision before we make it in March. We need to spend some time working through that whole issue, I think, in more detail. So Paige, did you have a chance to take a look at available cash?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have available, we have $9 million invested with the state treasurer right now that's readily available to us. And we budgeted $6.2 million this fiscal year for the city center project. I am going to.
I'm sorry.
Sorry
go
about
ahead.
that. I'm going to be working with Woody to put together more of a cash flow needs assessment for this project. We just haven't got that far yet.
Okay. Would you include in that cash flow and the cash needs an analysis of whether we should look at another bond? With borrowing costs excuse me, as low as they are today, what would it cost us if we wanted to go ahead and look at another bond?
Yes.
So the council can consider that.
Yes, I'll have that ready for you.
Okay. Any other from council to get back to the engineer so that he'll have before he completes his work? Yes, Councilman Duncan.
So in building that building, are you then saying that you'd be looking for investors as well to build it, or is we, the city, will pay all of it?
I think that, right now the building is it is out in terms of, it's like one of the final decisions that we would want to look at. I think there's a very good chance that there will be a build. I think there will actually be two buildings built, one in our land and one on the other, on the existing business area that will go in whether we do anything or not. And so we may not need to build a building, but it would be my hope that if we decided we do want to build a building, that we would offer the ability for people to invest in it. I know a few people just in town who would be interested in doing that potentially. So it would be a possibility if, that I think the first step is whether the council would consider risking council money to build a spec building. And then the second step, if we are considering that, would we open it up to investment from the outside? And I don't know what my decision would be on either of those questions at this point, but I'm willing to look at both of them. So, any other comments that we want to get to Woody? All right. Thank you for the presentation. It brings us up to speed in terms of a lot of the work that you've been doing in, behind the scenes. And we'll continue this, and we'll figure out a time for a work study sometime in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Detail. Okay, next item on is what? Is public safety reports, starting with Goodyear. I'm not sure who we have from the city of Goodyear Fire. Oh, who is he? See him. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year to everybody. For the month of December, we had 50 calls that occurred within Litchfield Park. That's down about 12% from last January. 45 of those, or 90%, were EMS related calls. And we did have a decrease certainly in our number of calls at La Loma, down at 3. However, Las Cruces was up a little bit. So we will be reaching out to Las Cruces to kind of work with them on their call volume that comes out of that facility. Otherwise, nothing else that's outstanding on this report, but I am available for any questions that the council may have.
Okay, questions from council? Don't see any hands up. So thank you for being here. Thanks for spending a portion of your evening with us tonight.
Absolutely.
And thank all your guys for all that they do for us. We appreciate their service.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Next report is from Maricopa County. I think we have Captain Bratton. I think I saw him here earlier.
Yes, sir.
Oh, there you are. Welcome, Captain.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just a quick comment on the LPRs. I spoke with Aaron Nickel with Flock Safety via email, and he's going to hook me up with the people that will bring my crew up to speed on how to interface with the system so that we can be ready to go as soon as the cameras are operational, so that we can utilize them to their, and use it as the tool that it's intended for. I'll run real quick through statistics. There isn't anything that's very significantly different except for residential and vehicle burglaries, which we had that spike of 10 in November, and that's back down to 4. Child crimes, we had 2, 1 robbery, the 4 residential or vehicle burglaries, 3 thefts from vehicle, 4 shopliftings, 2 criminal damage or graffiti, 1 DUI, 6 traffic accidents, 12 written warnings, and 15 citations. There was 1 harassment or stalking call, 3 threats to commit crimes calls, 5 trespassings, 3 animal problems, 2 juvenile disturbing or runaways, 6 neighbor disturbing, 10 suspicious activity, either person or vehicles, 1 parking violation, 1 911 hang up, 3 commercial alarms, and 4 residential alarms, 2 civil matters, 2 natural deaths of persons, and 1 suicide, and then 49 patrol or vacation watches. That's all I have for a statistical update.
Questions from the council? Looks like it's going to be an easy month, Captain. I don't see any questions.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for your efforts and the efforts of your sheriff's deputies. Just maybe one question. Have any of the deputies commented on the impact of the speed bumps on Bird Lane?
I haven't had any feedback from the deputies in regards to it.
Okay, I'm just
I
curious.
haven't had feedback at all.
Thank you, and let the deputies know that we appreciate their service to our community. Oh, it looks like we got a question.
Yeah, I just, since you brought up speed bumps, I did want to say I've received a couple calls from people that live, I want to say, on the north side of Litchfield Road. They're I would call them, I don't know if you call them veterans, but they're older than I am. They aren't in favor of them, and I just told them, sorry, but they're there. They're not going away. So they
North-
just wanted to
north
be,
side-
they wanted to be
north side of Bird-
recognized.
North side of Bird Lane?
Yeah, well, actually, one of them's Len Kirshner. He didn't care. He wanted me to tell all of you. I was like, well, probably not. He has a little MG. It's probably like a Disneyland ride for him, but whatever. It's like, sorry, Len. Anyway,
Okay. I can tell you from personal experience that it appears to be a lot slower, that appears to have very much slowed down the traffic.
yeah, just got to get used to it.
All right. Again, Captain, thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you.
We'll go on to the next item, which is our finance report from Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Your agenda packet has, in the council communication, it has a lot of detail about the finances, and then the attachments are the tax revenue summary and the financial summary. There's a few things in there I'd like to point out. Just need to share my screen really quick. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
So retail sales, we had another good month. Retail was up 21% this December over the prior December. And real quickly, I wanted to mention at first, where this is through December of 2020, so it's 50% of the fiscal year. So it's a good benchmark for us. Retail sales in total year to date is up 27% over last fiscal year. So retail is still doing very well. Online sales, a big increase, 75%, but December of 2019 was only the second month of reporting. So I think there were some education and some bugs to work out. I suspect this is going to level out in the next couple months. Restaurant and bars, unfortunately, we're down again. That can be directly related to COVID restrictions. Utilities are up 24%, rentals are up 5%, and then the other category is down 8%. And this is where the travel-related industry is put, so that can also be directly related to COVID. Construction sales tax, or in total, we're up 14% over this time, over last December, so still doing very well. Construction sales tax, it was down 3% over December of last year. However, we're still at 70% of what we budgeted in construction sales tax, so I'm not concerned about this. We're still doing, we're at already 70% of budget estimates, so still doing very well. And year-to-date total construction is up 14%. Before I move on to the full report, are there any questions on this?
Questions from the council? Don't see any hands.
Hey,
So,
question.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, Paige, I'm confused. COVID hit us March or so of 2020. I don't see any decreases across the board in any industry, any of your categories. I mean, 2018, things were going full blast. The
Are you
travel
looking at-
industry, for example.
I want to make sure we're looking at the same thing. Does it say tax revenue summary at the top, December 2020?
Yes.
So if you look here, this percent change from 2019 to 2020, where I have my cursor, this is where you can see the decrease in a few of those categories. So restaurant and bars was a decrease of 7%. And then this other was a decrease of 8%.
But they're all
And
still
then
better, equal to or better than 2018.
Yes, they're still better than 2018. So COVID hasn't impacted us terribly bad as it has some other cities and towns. But this column here is comparing 2020 to 2019. I hope that.
For a sales category like golf, does that fall under retail sales? Or does that fall under other?
That's going to be in the other category. There's just, we have to have a minimum of 10 businesses that are in one category before we can display it individually. Otherwise, it gives too much information and people could figure out what business we were talking about.
Right, I was just wondering, I didn't know if you put it under retail sales, when you have a round of golf or selling a round of golf, or if you put it under other. So it's in, it's under other.
Yeah, I'm struggling. I don't see any of our businesses struggling significantly.
Yeah, it would not, you'd not get that sense from our sales tax collections, would you?
No. I mean, service businesses don't pay sales tax, so they wouldn't show in these numbers. And some of those, the medical, they're down, way down. But some of the ones that provide products that pay sales tax, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before I move to the next one?
No, just a comment. You probably, it's probably going to be more telling when these are monthly numbers, correct? So,
to the left, monthly, and then over to the right is year to
annual.
date.
So the numbers that we see in March and April are probably going to be more telling of the impact of COVID, because it'll pick up January and February and into March.
Yeah, if you look at the
see
fiscal year 19 and 20, we're not seeing any. Most of them are up between 19 and 20.
Yeah, I understand. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I think when I bring you the May report in June, that's when we'll really see an impact, because that will be actual March sales when we were actually under the stay-at-home order and some businesses actually had to close. So,
the March of 2020 is in our 2020 number already, right? Or not? It has to be. It has to already be in.
Yeah,
March of
that's included.
2021.
I mean, the month may have been bad, but the year overall was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that it hasn't impacted us as significant as it has some of the other cities and towns.
The interesting thing, you get the reports, the anecdotal reports from other mayors and in meetings that I've been in, is almost everybody's revenues are up and up, 10% plus.
What I was trying to get a sort of a semi grasp on was, if things get back to normal, is there going to be a bump to these numbers, or are these the normal numbers?
A great question. And I think one of the reasons why we haven't had such a significant impact is a lot of our businesses are deemed essential, or some of our larger businesses that people will continue to shop at regardless of what was going on, because that's just where we purchase our essential items.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So let me pull up my other report. Okay, are you able to see this summary of revenues and expenditures now?
Yes.
So local taxes, that's just what I went over. We're at 57% of our budget. State shared revenue, we're at 51%, so doing very well. One-time intergovernmental, this was the Arizona CARES Act money. It was 100% was budgeted in fiscal year 21, but it was split between 2 fiscal years. So this number won't change all year. The next 3 categories, they are down, but we can contribute those to COVID impacts as well. Fines are at 53%, and interest income, I did want to go into a little more detail about that. We had budgeted $100,000, and I think at the time it probably made sense because interest earnings were higher last year. But last year, the Federal Reserve, they made emergency reductions to interest rates because of the coronavirus to help offset potential economic impacts. I think we've all heard on the news lately how mortgage rates are historically low. So that ultimately impacts how much interest we're earning. So for comparison, at this time period last year, we had $9.3 million invested with the state treasurer, and we had collected $75,000 in interest earnings through the end of December. This year, we have $9.4 million invested with the state treasurer, and we've only earned just over $4,500. So our one-year average as of December 2020 was roughly 0.5%, and a year prior was roughly 2%. So I don't anticipate this to change much unless we hear the Federal Reserve making a change. But we can reasonably estimate we won't collect quite near $10,000 this year. Our operating expenditures, everybody is right in line. You do see at the top here, the city manager is at 70%, and that's due to the COVID-19 business assistance grants. They're flowing through the city manager's budget. The council did authorize spending of these funds. I just haven't done the official action to move the budget capacity from contingency to this department. But I will bring that to you towards the end of the year when we make all of our budget adjustments at once. Council and commission, there were just some bills that are due early on in the year, so this should smooth out. But in total, our departments are at 46%, and we're at 50% of the year, so doing well. Our one-time sources, construction sales tax that I already went over. Our capital expenditures were just at one-time capital expenditures were just over $480,000. Most of that has been spent on the city center, just under $342,000. Then we've done some other public works projects, some equipment, the rec center improvements, and city wall improvements. The total budget was nearly $7 million, with 6.2 of that being for the city center. So the fund balance ending as of December was $14.3 million. I don't have anything to point out for recreation or special events unless anybody has any questions. So I'll move to our special revenue funds. Our annual HERF distribution, we're at 49%, so just coming in under budget. I'm not too concerned about it. I think we'll probably make that up. Our total HERF expenditures were just under $271,000. They have been doing some capital projects that were just over $191,000. Streetlight Improvement District, we just collect, or the money is collected through the county treasurer and passed on to us, and we pay the light bills. Court Enhancement earned a little revenue, so they have an ending balance of $192,000. So the fund balance summary at the end of December, our general fund is at $14.3 million. Our special revenue funds are just under 1.7, with the grand total of 15.9. just briefly talked about finances for the city center. So just to keep in mind, the minimum balance that we need to keep on hand is 15%, so roughly 1.3 million. And then our stabilization reserve is 35%, so 3 million. We do have on hand 20 months worth of operating expenses, which is really incredible to have that much cash on hand. And that is all I have, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council? Don't see any hands. I can only see a portion of you. So if you have a question, speak up. Okay, I still don't see any hands. I got a full view now. So at this point, if you would just work on preparing the information we need for this meeting with Woody, so we can look at making some decisions on how to prioritize the items in the city center phasing that he brought to us. And
Definitely.
We'll do that again in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, good. So that takes us to our consent agenda, item 7A through E. Is there any council member who would like to take any item off of the consent agenda for further discussion? Specifically, is there any council member who would like to hear about the mitigation efforts that are being done on 7B or C, which are events that hopefully staff is put together a mitigation plan, and that plan has been communicated with the state? Does any councilman want to hear about that, or are we comfortable doing this on consent? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda 7A through E?
So moved.
Looks like moved by Councilman Donahue, seconded by Councilman Clare. Any further? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda is adopted as presented. Next item is the oath of office for our newly elected officials. So we have an oath that is going to be administered to John Romack and Ann Donahue and Ron Clare. And hopefully John Romack is here. I don't see him. John, are you? Okay, so we're going to administer the oath to Ann and Ron. If you would, I don't know, Terry, do we need them to stand up to do this, or can they just raise their right hand?
They can just raise their right hand.
Okay, that's good, because I didn't want to stand up either. Perfect. So raise your right hand. I, then your name.
I, Ann Donahue.
Ron?
Unmute yourself.
Got to go off mute.
I, Ron Clare,
Do solemnly swear that I will support
Do solemnly swear that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and the laws of the state of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
and defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and I will faithfully and partially discharge
the duties of the office of council member
the duties of the office of council member
to the best of my ability, so help me God.
to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Okay, you're officially sworn in. Amen.
Hey, you and Joe and Biden swore a bunch of men. You're just as good. That's what I'd say.
Oh, there you go. I'll just mark that down as a compliment. Thank you. All right. Takes us to the item B, which is election of a vice mayor. So Vice Mayor, are you prepared to serve as Vice Mayor again? I don't see you. Oh, there you are. Are you prepared to serve as Vice Mayor again, or do you want us to find somebody else?
If that's the opinion of the majority, I'd be happy to do it.
Okay, is there anyone on the council who would like to suggest a different council member to be Vice Mayor? And I will point out to everybody on the council, just so that you don't feel bashful about this, it is not unusual for cities to move the Vice Mayor position into different council members over the years. So we probably are a little unusual in that we have stayed with Councilman Vice Mayor Faith for about 16 years, 14 of which I've been mayor, I think. So he's been Vice Mayor for a long time. So it's up to the council if someone would like to see us make a change in that area. If not, then I need a motion to appoint Paul Faith as our Vice Mayor for the next 2 years.
Moved.
So I think it's just fine to have Paul Faith set up, but I suppose if people wanted to, I think Goodyear does that, don't they? They just pass it around and they assign it, right? They don't nominate, they just assign somebody.
I think they probably have a rotation. At least I know Avondale uses a certain rotation so that all the council members rotate through the position, over the course of some period of time. I don't know how Goodyear does it, although I know they do rotate it. So, and
It's a learning curve. Whoever does it learns a great deal, I guess. But I don't want to do it now, but
depends how much time you put into it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Clare to appoint Paul Faith as the Vice Mayor going forward for another term. Is that a second or a comment from Councilman Brandon Watson?
Well, it was a comment, but do I have to have it second first and then a comment?
It would be nice to have a second to the motion.
Okay, I'll second the motion. And then my
Okay.
comment would be that I think at this juncture in time with what we've got going on, I really like the idea of having the consistency of someone who's got the history and the background and the ability to step into your shoes should that event happen and we need someone with the experience there. So we just got enough on our plate that's really important. And I think Paul has that experience right now. I would be terrified to be in that role right now. So
So don't nominate yourself.
Absolutely not.
I think it would be great if we see the Vice Mayor stay in his spot. We do have a lot of history and there's a lot of important decisions to be gone through that he is a tremendous resource. So any other comments or any other motions from the floor for someone else to consider? All right. All those in favor of appointing Paul Faith as our Vice Mayor for the next 2 years, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Vice Mayor, you're still Vice Mayor.
Thank you kindly, guys. I really appreciate the support. And sometimes I can seem like I'm being a little bit stubborn and obnoxious, but I've got the best interest of the city at heart. And sometimes somebody's got to be bad cop when we're dealing with developers. So
You do a good job.
I appreciate your support.
You do a very good job of being going through all the details of many of our decisions, and that's very helpful to all of us on council, including me, but I think for everybody. Everybody relies on you for that. So thank you for all your efforts. Next item is item C, which is a regular meeting schedule. I'm going to suggest that we keep the schedule of using the third Wednesday of each month at 7 o'clock as our normal meeting date that we will schedule our normal city council meetings on, but with the proviso that the first meeting and the first Wednesday of every month, you need to try to maintain your calendar open on that so we have another meeting night if we end up needing it. As we get into some of the things that are going to go on this next year with the city center and as that project moves forward, the need for meetings twice a month may very well materialize because it may be too long in between regular meetings to respond to the needs of the city with decisions on the city center. So with the idea that we would keep all of us, our calendar as clear as possible on the first Wednesday also. I would entertain a motion to set the regular meeting as the third Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Is that a motion, Councilman Bernard Watson, or a comment?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, second. All right, now are there any comments? Any discussion about the meeting dates? Okay, otherwise, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have our meeting date set again for the third Wednesday of every month with, with the proviso on the first Wednesday for either a special meeting or a work study. Recreation Public Ground Commission term limits, Mr. Williams.
Mayor and council, this one's pretty simple. Basically, the RPG, as you know, is 7 members. They are divided up into 3-year terms. That being said, they're supposed to roll off a few members roll off every year, so there's a constant revolving of members on RPG board. It's supposed to be 3, 2, and 2. However, because of some changes in the past, we got off pattern. And the way it's currently based for this year, it's 4, 2, 2. And of course, now I got to do my math. No, I'm sorry. 4, 2, and 1. So thank you. So we want to get it back to 3, 2, and 2. So the issue with that is David Schwacke's term would have expired this year. Staff would request that we basically extend David Schwacke's term another year for 2 reasons. One, that would get us back on proper rotation. Also, that would keep either Brian Faith or Brian Colberth for having to reapply when they were just put on the board last month. Again, it's just a simple change. It's basically extending that term for another year. Instead of expiring March of 21, it would expire in March of 22, and that would get us back on track. Certainly, one question.
Any discussion or questions? Is there a motion to make this change?
So moved.
So second, Councilman Clare. Any discussion? Yeah, motion by Vice Mayor, second by Councilman Clare. Is there any other discussion? Oh, question? Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Is Swati agreed to be conscripted for an extra year in this process, or is this going to be a surprise to him?
No, sir. He actually resigned off RPG this fall. He was one of the seats that we filled. I just wrote it that way to clarify which term it was.
Okay, so
it's the Schwacke Memorial seat.
So do we know with the 2 new ones, we can just flip a coin and figure out who gets it? Or I don't quite understand how we're proportioning out the.
Sure, as far as who's filling what seat.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that would be the fairest way to do it. Honestly, just we flip a coin as far as the whose term goes to who, because as far as that way, it's just fair as far as who's expiring, because there were two seats empty and we filled 2 seats.
Yeah.
We didn't specify which ones. I think that'd be the easiest way to do it.
I agree. Just flip it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We'll let the city manager work that out with these RPG members.
Thank you, Mayor.
But we do want the seats assigned, so there's no question going forward when their terms are up.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next item is extension of the premises patio for ground control. Ms. Roth.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In your packet, you will see an application received from Ground Control regarding the extension of premise/patio. Staff is reviewing the map of where they would like to extend. This will assist them with the COVID-19 restrictions. The applicant is in attendance tonight if you have any questions for her. City would receive 2.8% sales tax revenue from all the liquor sales. And council's duty is not to approve or deny, but make a recommendation to Arizona Department of Liquor Licenses and Control to either approve, disapprove, or make no recommendation.
All right, any questions from council? Just as a reminder, this is a policy that we agreed upon probably 6 months ago to encourage businesses that were impacted by COVID to come in and ask for changes that would allow them, allow them to do things to help their business. And so this is the first request we've had for a change that is within that policy. Although I think there's another one that may be coming forward. I think it's particularly telling that the governor learned of our program and made our program statewide. So apparently it's a good program. So is there a motion to recommend approval of this to the Arizona Department of Liquor License and Control? Claire, and seconded by the Vice Mayor.
Tom.
Question from Tom, Mr. Councilman Rososi. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Any comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. It carries and we'll make that recommendation.
Thank you.
Next item is an award of the Business Assistant Program Phase 2. Looks like we have one request. Is that right? One request?
We have 6 total.
6 requests. All right. So
Yeah.
are there any questions from anyone? Here we go. Questions from the council? Okay, if there are not, is there a motion to award these funds under Phase 2 of our Business Assistance Program?
Can I, a question?
Yes, Vice Mayor.
A couple, we just approved the liquor license expansion for ground control. But then we've got the application here with different owners on the application. Do we know or care why?
I didn't see that. We had the applicant here a minute ago. Maybe we can ask her.
Yeah, she was on the, I thought they were the former owners. And maybe this is the new owner on the application for the assistance?
I know that the ownership has changed, and so that's probably the case.
It did change in September of 2019. Is what they.
Excuse me. It may be possible that Rassus has the liquor license for the business, and that's why she has applied for the
Okay,
extension.
okay, so they can do that, okay.
Can I add something too? It's my
Yes.
understanding they're somewhat still involved in the business, that they've sold it, but that they're still engaged to some extent. So that may be why the liquor license may still be in their name.
They just may have stated as a responsible party.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to award the Business Assistance Program Funds Phase 2? Is that a motion from Councilman Rostosi? Yes. So moved. Is there a second? Councilman Claire. Okay, all those, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That completes our business section. I don't believe we have a need for an executive session, so thank you for your attendance. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from the Vice Mayor. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you for your attention this evening. It ended up being a later meeting than I thought we might have, given the length of our agenda, but we had a lot of things to go over. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you all again for your
Everyone.
support.
Night, everybody.
Yeah, and thank the Vice Mayor for being willing to be Vice Mayor again.
And you're gonna
Thank
work
you,
me anyway,
Vice
whether I am or not, probably, so.
That's true. Hey, and let's say thank you to Joe. This is the quietest meeting from the city attorney we've ever had.
I am trying to get your money's worth out of me.
Good job. All right, good night, guys.